for Beaches Watch. For those of you who may not know about Beaches Watch, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan civic organization. We were founded in 2004, and this year is our 10-year anniversary. Yay! So we welcome you here tonight. We host these meetings on a monthly basis, so we can have speakers talk about issues that are relevant for our beaches communities. And our mission is actually in educating and engaging citizens in the decisions that are being made that affect our beaches. So we hope you will get a lot out of tonight's meeting. Before we get started, I want to make a few announcements. I hope you picked up an agenda when you came in. If you didn't, there are some on these tables back here. On the agenda is some information that we want you to take home with you. On the back is also contact information for all of our beaches elected officials, so if you ever need to talk to someone, this is how you get to them, including our school board representative and even Andrew Crenshaw too. So everything you ever wanted is on here, and so hopefully you'll take it with you. So as I mentioned before, Beaches Watch is celebrating our 10-year anniversary. We will have a celebration on Saturday, September 27th. And we hope that you guys will plan to join us. It's going to be at the Cobalt Moon Center. Curtis, do you have one of the posters? Curtis designed a gorgeous poster. It's going to be a really nice event from 6 to 9. And anyway, we are planning to, because it's a memorable event for us as far as the 10-year anniversary, we wanted to do something memorable, and we will be recognizing a very memorable person in our community, somebody who's made a lasting impact on all of our beaches, and we will be honoring Mayor Harriet Pruitt at our 10-year anniversary. So there's information here about how to get tickets. There will be food, there will be beer, there will be wine.
I'll be there.
And Harriet will be signing autographs if you want, and you might even get your picture taken with her. Who knows, right? She's famous. But anyway, we encourage you and invite you to join us. It will be a really nice evening. And if you'd like to get a sponsorship, we do have sponsorships available, and that just helps us with the cost for the event. Then also, I'm really excited to announce that Green Room Brewing is actually brewing a special beer for the Beaches Watch 10-year anniversary. And they're actually making the beer for the event. So they are having a really fun event on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Anybody who wants can come and help them brew the Beaches Watch anniversary beer. And it's a great opportunity to see how a microbrewery works and to see how beer is brewed. And then I hope nobody plans to like take anything and put poison in there or anything. But but anyway, hopefully the beer will taste good when it's done. Okay, so that's going to be Tuesday, September 9th at 9 a.m. at Green Room Brewing. It'll be a lot of fun, and the owner, Mark Stillman, said just wear clothes like you would wear if you were working in your yard. So you might get dirty, I guess, is what he's saying. But it should be a lot of fun, so we hope anybody who wants to will plan to go out there. Also, we have the Neptune Beach candidate forum scheduled for Thursday, October 16th at Neptune Beach City Hall. And so we'll be sending out more information about that as it gets closer to the date. Jack's Beach is going to have a candidate forum, but we don't have the date finalized for that yet. But there will be 2 seats that are up for election on November 4th. So we'll be getting out more information about that as we finalize it. And just want to let you know there is no October meeting since we'll be having 2 candidate forums in October. So we'll just forego the monthly meeting that month because the candidate forums I think will be enough to keep everybody busy. So now before we get started, I want to recognize some of the elected officials we have here with us today. I mentioned Harriet Pruitt and she left, but Mayor Harriet Pruitt is here somewhere from Neptune Beach. And then we also have Mayor Charlie Latham from Jacksonville Beach. And then we have Joseph Zimmerman, who's with Janet Adkins' office, who's here tonight. And am I missing anybody else? Okay. Thank you guys for being here with us tonight. So let's go ahead and get started. Yes, sir.
Can I make a brief announcement? Do you mind?
Yes,
There's excuse me for interrupting the program, but there's a precious young lady in Jacksonville Beach, a 9-year-old girl named Kate Amato, and she's no relation to Rick Amato, from those of you know Rick at Beaches Energy. She's battling stage 4 cancer. And so there's a great community effort going on right now to help raise funds for the family and just connect with her and buy the Kate Strong bracelets and things like that. For those of you that are technically competent, it's hashtag Kate Strong. And for those of you that aren't, if you go on Facebook, you can look up Team Kate. But if you do that, I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you.
and then I think, Warren, you have an announcement too.
Oh, thanks, Andy.
Sorry, I
That's
almost
okay.
forgot.
Does anybody know who the wildest woman in America is?
Sandy Goldie.
She's in the top 5 mayors.
Diana Anderson?
No, that's tough. No, it's a lady that lives up in Cumberland Island.
Oh.
And there's a book about her called Untamed, the wildest woman in America. And the guy that wrote it is a guy named Will Marlin, and he lives in Nashville. And he kept going down and interview this woman over a 10-year period. And he's going to be in this room September the 17th to talk about the wildest woman in America. She knows more about sea turtles than any PhD. She eats roadkill. She's been married 3 times and shot one of her lovers and killed him. And she's kayaked with Jimmy Carter. She's just an unbelievable person, and Will Hart's going to come. So if you can come back here September 17th, we'll hear all about the wildest woman in America. Thanks, Andy.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, then also I wanted to mention that before I introduce our speakers, what we're going to do is we're going to have our 2 speakers talk tonight. They're going to talk about, they each are taking a side of an issue, which is the issue about changeable digital message signs, which is something that we're starting to see more of in Jacksonville, and possibly here in our beaches community. So we wanted to get both sides of the issue represented tonight. And so we have Bruce Enyeart. I'm sorry, I know I did exactly what you did. Bruce Enyeart, who's with Don Bell Signs, and he's going to be talking to us. And then we'll have Bill Brinton, who is an attorney, and he's with Scenic Jacksonville. And what I'd like to do is we'll have each of them present their information and their side of the issue, and then we'll open the floor to questions. That way they'll have an opportunity to get all their information out there for you, and then we'll let you guys ask them questions. So, yes. Okay, so there is some material that both of our speakers brought that you can take with you. So we encourage you to go to the table that Eileen is sitting at and pick up some of the information so you can take it home with you. So first of all, we're going to start with Bruce Enyeart with Don Bell Signs. And Bruce, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Sandy. I've been in the sign business for 27 years. I live in San Pablo, across from the Mayo Clinic. I spent a lot of time at the beaches. I'm real active in the Beaches Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the board for over 15 years. My oldest daughter and her family live at the beach, including 2 of my 10 grandchildren. And I know 3rd Street and Beach Boulevard are 35-mile-an-hour speed limits. And there are plenty of traffic lights, and it's a slow ride. I feel this 8-second pole should replace the existing 24-hour pole. Our company provides and installs the 3 surfboard signs, which includes the message centers. I believe that businesses in Jacksonville Beach should be able to advertise as much as they want to, and with this one for City Hall, they could put PSAs up there. whether it's when a meeting, silver alert, amber alert, the nights of council meetings, planning meetings. Right now, the present code limits the height and square footage of any sign in Jacksonville Beach. This would preclude any large electronics. I do not know of any accidents were caused by electronic sign. When I sell an electronic sign, I tell them to use the KISS rule. Keep it simple. Keep your message out there and get it off of there. So many people try to put a major historical novel up there, and no one can read it, and it's useless. People put a lot of money into these signs, and I think small business within Jacksonville Beach should be able to advertise. I checked with some of my colleagues in Daytona. Jacksonville has 8 seconds, Clay County 8 seconds, Melbourne 8 seconds, Volusia County 8 seconds, Castleberry, where I did the Salvation Army, was 5 seconds. Orange County has no hold time. Now, St. Johns County has no message centers except the county-owned amphitheater. Port Orange, where our plant facility is located, does not allow message centers, but the City Hall has one, and they use it for PSAs. City Council meeting tonight, 7 o'clock, in chambers, whatever. They don't have anything to sell anymore in the City of Jacksonville Beach has anything to sell. Other than this past weekend, they could have put rip currents or anything else that applies at the time. Like anything that someone calls in and feels it's important enough to get across, they can put it up there. Now, I've gone down, I spent a lot of time, a lot of money at the beaches. And I'm going down Beach Boulevard or 3rd Street. There's enough traffic lights. You are not going to make a speedy drive down there. And signs are in your peripheral vision. They're not straight on. And if people keep the signs, I ignore signs with a whole bunch of stuff on them. I can't read them. But if they have a simple message, I think the 8-second rule will work. Now, in different cities, enforcement's always an issue. But I was sitting at Tom Goldberg's office downtown Jacksonville one day, and a whole stack of papers. And I asked him, I said, what are those? He said, concerned citizens calling in to report a violation of the sign code. I said, how do you deal with it, Tom? He says, well, I'm forced to send someone out to check it. If they are, they get a citation. And a warning or a citation. And I think even in our small town of Jacksonville Beach, I think that the city may not be able to be there 24/7 and check all these things. And I would appreciate all the folks in Jacksonville Beach, concerned people, to call in if they see there's a problem, like there's a problem with anything else, whether it's a housing issue or anything of that nature. I think the city of Port Orange, I understand, we're getting the word that they're about to allow now. What conditions, I don't know. Everything changes every time we go someplace. I know we've been around 67 years. This is our 67th year of business. We cannot turn in a job without a permit in hand. And on all our permits, where there's electronics involved, we boldly put the whole. So there's no question. And we try to advise our customers that buy electronics what they need to do to make it work. I know mine's short and sweet, but I just rely on the city council to vote for the best interests of the city. Thank you very much. Thanks for
Okay, next we have Bill Brinton with Scenic Jacksonville, and he's going to talk about
Big fancy presentation.
the other side of the issue. And just to make sure everybody understands, what's been proposed, Jacksonville Beach is going to consider allowing digital message signs to change every 8 seconds. As Bruce mentioned earlier, currently it's only allowed every 24 hours. Neptune Beach currently doesn't allow any digital message sign change, and Atlantic Beach doesn't, except for time and temperature. But anyway, so Jacksonville already allows it, but at an 8-second hold time, which is what Bruce had mentioned. So anyway, Bill, we'll let you have the floor now.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back here with Beaches Watch. I've had the occasion to be here before, and I enjoyed the presentation. I do want to talk about electronic message signs, both on-site signs for the business, sometimes they're known as accessory signs, signs that are associated with the business being conducted on the premises, but also talk about billboards, because you know, when Bruce talked about that 8-second rule we have in Jacksonville, and that 8-second rule they have in Clay County, that was drafted by the billboard industry. And I saw that there's a handout of driving performance in the presence and absence of billboards, authored by Suzanne Lee with Virginia Tech. I had the privilege a number of years ago of taking her deposition in Buffalo, New York, because Ms. Lee was an expert witness for Lamar Advertising Company and Lamar's suit against the town of Orchard Park. Orchard Park is where the Buffalo Bills play, the Ralph Wilson Stadium. And Orchard Park has no billboards. But Lamar wanted Orchard Park to have 88 billboards. And I'm pleased to report to you that after years of litigation, Orchard Park has still the same number of billboards they had when the litigation began. 0. And more about Susie Lee on another day, but her views and her expert opinion have been examined in the past by a U.S. District Judge, and her bias or lack thereof have been in a reported federal court decision. So that may be something that Jacksonville Beach might want to take a look at to the extent her opinions are being offered. Now I have my pajamas on tonight. I did go to the University of Virginia, and as a good scholar of Virginia, I honor Jefferson, who I think the best quote from Jefferson is that communities should be planned with an eye to the effect on the human spirit of being continually surrounded by a maximum of beauty. And I think that's something we all strive for, because being surrounded continually by a maximum of beauty is good for business. This isn't a question of being something that you're against business, really having a beautiful community, a community that accommodates whatever the community character is of your community here at Jacksonville Beach or Neptune Beach area or Atlantic Beach. It's the community. What is the best for the community? Before I get to the story behind this picture, I passed out or had the Dr. Seuss's pamphlet for La Jolla, California back in the 1950s. Does everyone have that pamphlet? If you do, you need to pick one up and take it home, because La Jolla, California, which is it's a community within San Diego County. It's right on the coast by San Diego. The town council of San Diego commissioned Ted Geisel, who was Dr. Seuss. Andy and I probably had a cat in the hat, and all the other Seuss goes back when we were young back in the 50s, or 60s. Remember that? Warren?
Yeah, I sure did.
Let's say Andy. We go back to Wall Street. He was commissioned to basically address the issue of signage and how signage can be, if it's controlled, it can be good for business. It's necessary for business, but if it's not in control, it can be the worst thing in the world for business and for communities. So Ted Geisel, Dr. Seuss, captured it perfectly in his Signs of Civilization, a pamphlet that he was commissioned by the business community in La Jolla, California, and it's worth a read. Everyone in America should read that because it tells the story that I'm here to tell tonight. Clearwater, Florida. This picture was taken in 1988 by Mary Jo Fox. Well, actually, Mary Jo didn't take this, but it was in the Clearwater Sun-Times in 1988. Now, if you follow the billboard battles, you know that in 1987, we had a vote in Duval County. Every one of the beaches that could vote back then, and that voted, got to weigh in as to whether or not we wanted to have more billboards in Jacksonville or wanted to stop billboards and start removing billboards. 1987, Jacksonville, Florida. The next year in Clearwater, citizens in Clearwater wanted to do what Jacksonville did. And so they collected petitions. And they wanted to do the same thing. And they were ultimately successful. This picture showed some of the problems in Clearwater back in those days. And it wasn't just billboards that are far in the distance in this picture of Gulf Bay Boulevard, but it was on-site signs too. And I joked when I showed this comparison picture around the country that Clearwater was so ugly back in 1988 that people were leaving town. They were headed east. They were headed away from the coast. They were headed to Daytona. They were getting out of town. Well, I used this picture in federal litigation in the early part of the last decade and defending Clearwater against an attack by a billboard company. Because Mary Jo Fox went to that same spot, the exact same spot. She's a code enforcement officer, still is to this day, 13 years later. She went to the same spot and took that photo. Now look, you see the Burger King sign? You see the Arby's sign? You see the Colonel's chicken. The signs were tall, they were out of scale. You don't see any landscaping in the median. But here, there's a Burger King sign. Arby's is there. Here's the Colonel. You have trees in the median, and the billboards are now almost all gone from Gulf Bay Boulevard. And that's because the Clearwater City Council, going back to the 1980s and through the 1990s, through the last decade and into this decade, have paid very close attention to signage. And today, in connection with electronic signs, although maybe most communities in Florida prohibit electronic signs, they allow electronic signs. I helped write the last iteration of their sign code. It was a 3-year effort. They worked with the business community, they worked with the chamber. They allow electronic signs, but it's a 6-hour dwell time for general signs, and for many signs, it's a 3-hour dwell time. And they do allow time and temperature signs for the shorter time frame, if it's a time or temperature. But if it's a general sign, it's a 6-hour dwell time. I work a lot with people in Houston, Texas, and Texas has a 5-minute dwell time. And in Jacksonville, on the other side of the ditch, until Clear Channel drafted an ordinance that our wise city council decided to adopt, it was a 3-minute dwell time. And if you drive up and down some of our roadways now, you start seeing the impact of what Dr. Seuss was trying to warn against in his pamphlet for La Jolla, California. Blinking signs that are continuing to proliferate as everybody wants to compete with their next door neighbor. And it's not good for business. It's not good for everybody who's trying to compete for attention. It's not good for drivers. It's not good for aesthetics. Going back to people caring about their community, this is a picture from Maitland, Florida, taken last year. Someone proposed a digital billboard that would be changing every 8 seconds along I-4 in the town of Maitland. It would be near a residential area, but everybody that lived in Maitland, was aware of this billboard changing every 8 seconds. And they turned out and they told their city commission, don't do it. City commission reversed course and said, we don't want it. we don't, and they did a complete reversal, and there's no digital billboard along I-4 in Macon, Florida today. People do care about this. Now, back to the other side of the ditch. And I think I need to talk to Mrs. Brinton sometime, because maybe we need to move this side of the ditch. This is my world. This is not too far from my office. You may have seen, if you pick up Times Union from time to time, there's been a debate about a digital billboard that would change every 8 seconds. That's been rejected by the Downtown Development Review Board. And then CBS Outdoor took an appeal to the Downtown Investment Authority. And they upheld the denial of this billboard. And now it's on appeal to the Jacksonville City Council, and I have no idea what's going to happen at the Jacksonville City Council. This is not a photo simulation that Bill Brinton put together. This billboard is not there today. This is CBS Outdoors' own photo simulation of how this would look to the businesses along Kings Road, Kings Avenue. And I don't know if they thought this was going to be attractive because they're in the business of advertising and telling everybody that there's a Subway or there's a Burger King or there's an opportunity to buy an AT&T wireless device every 8 seconds is something that people want to know about. But I guarantee you, the people that have their businesses along this road, they've turned out in mass saying, we don't want this. So again, it's an issue about community character. Shortly before Charles Perrault died, on the 4th of July in 1997, he was with a group of from Scenic in the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, and he gave a great speech. I'll be happy to share that speech with anyone who would like it. I'll send it to Sandy, and Sandy, you can share it with people. He said, one could go on and on listing the determined efforts going on in 100,000 American places. We do need legislation. But the way it's really going to have to be done is place by place, and one place after another by the people who live there. So don't pay attention to what they do in Clearwater, although I think it's a pretty good example. Certainly don't do what they do in the City of Jacksonville. Don't do what they do in some of these other communities, Clay County, whatever. Do what's right for Jacksonville Beach. If you live in Neptune, do what's right for Neptune. If you live in Atlantic Beach, do what's right for Atlantic Beach. What is the character of your community? Beauty is good for business. I always say that wherever I speak. I was involved in the case on behalf of Scenic America in an amicus brief supporting the town, the city of Concord, New Hampshire. And I have a few more minutes. The city of Concord, New Hampshire had the experience, kind of what was alluded to earlier with enforcement. And they decided that in the interest of traffic safety and community aesthetics, they should prohibit electronic message signs, like some communities do, Port Orange or other, perhaps even most cities in Florida. They just decided, we tried this out, it doesn't work, and we should have a prohibition. Well, they were sued, and they won, and they won at the U.S. First Circuit Court of Appeals, which said, and this is, I believe this is true, electronic message centers which provide more visual stimuli than traditional signs logically will be more distracting and more hazardous. When you think about it, if you have something as you're traveling down the road and it's up there for 8 seconds, and it attracts the eye away from the driving task, I mean, isn't that instinctively more distracting? Well, what driver is going to admit to an officer, oh, I was negligent? I can tell you as a lawyer that knows human nature, you don't admit to negligence to a police officer. The First Circuit Court of Appeals said the alternative of allowing EMCs but imposing certain conditions on them, such as limiting the number of times per day a message could change, would have created steep monitoring costs and other complications for the city. When we had a discussion about Tom Goldsberry, the chief building official in Jacksonville, sitting down and talking about he's had, Jacksonville is complaint driven. Of course, he had to know that you could make a complaint that's going to be answered. I can drive up Roosevelt Boulevard or Plains Boulevard any day of the week and see about 20 or 30 violations. And if I want to spend all day calling them in, I may get some enforcement, may not. But, that there is a problem when you have electronic message signs running at frequencies that is very difficult to enforce. I say many Florida cities do not allow, I believe the answer is most cities do not allow electronic message signs. You can certainly find ones that do. You can find areas that allow them to change once a second. And they vary from hours to minutes to just seconds. So the question is, at the end of the day, what do you want? Do you want to have no electronic message signs? Do you want to allow them to have a middle ground, or do you want them to do every 8 seconds? That's the question for the beach, for Jacksonville Beach, and probably for the other beach communities. Clearwater, 3 hours for menu signs, 6 hours for general message signs. That's what they decided to do. And they have been following this path of making Clearwater a more attractive community year after year after year after year after year, from the 80s to the 90s to the last decade to this decade. And so I would say, think carefully about what the path that Clearwater has chosen. It's not the total prohibition, but it's not the every few seconds either. It's a middle ground. Now, in my last, I'm happy to answer questions, but I will tell you this. I got involved in this fight, as Warren knows, as Harriet knows, back in the mid-1980s. I served on the JCCI study, and we were dealing with a billboard problem. We were dealing with an industry that was out of control, an industry that thought that they could control the city council, and they more or less did. For the last year, on the other side of the ditch, we've had 6 paid lobbyists working over our city council to nullify the city charter that was passed with a 60% vote at the polls in 1987. They're seeking to strip out the citizen enforcement. They're seeking to strip out the fines and penalties for erecting an illegal billboard. And they're seeking to strip out the prohibition on new billboards. And they have the gall to have it actually written by the Pierce County lawyer whose name appears as drafted by Carl Sanders, introduced by Richard Clark. And the current version has drafted by Carl Sanders, who's the Pierce County lobbyist, and Steve Diebenow, who's the CBS outdoor lobbyist, the 2 largest billboard companies in North America. And they're fighting among themselves. And who would introduce that legislation? Much less could there possibly be 10 city council members that would vote in favor of that? And I would tell you, absolutely, because they've been working on that council now for 14 months to get 10 votes. And it's kind of like it's been so silent for all this time. How many people know that we're within 3 weeks of having the city council strip out the protections in the city charter, this countywide charter that protects the beaches too, of the ban on new billboards? How many of you know that? We're right on the verge. And it's the same people that wrote this legislation for 8 seconds in Jacksonville several years ago to pay for the vote. Thank you very much, Sandy.
Okay, so do we have questions for these 2 gentlemen? Just raise your hand. Yes, Jim.
For either one of the 2 of you, electronic sign messages have already had an inroad into Jacksonville Beach. At the south end of Jacksonville Beach, there's a real estate office that has a new electronic sign, and you can see that sucker from 3 blocks away. They can turn out the street lights on that block and nobody would notice the difference. If you come north on 3rd Street, in the outside lane, right in front of McDonald's, there's a much smaller sign that is so bright that the first thing you're going to do when you reach that intersection is look at the sign and not the stoplight. Electronic signs with intense illumination are distractions, and nobody can deny that. You can listen all you want to the guy about the sign company, but it's a distraction. It's a bigger distraction than a standard billboard would be.
Well, do you guys want to come up here? So, because we're videotaping the meeting in that way, and that way people can ask you questions and you can respond.
Well, on all the electronic message centers,
computer inside controls the intensity of the illumination.
It is patented.
Well, it should. I mean, I know there's cases where it lights up the whole place.
If those are your signs, you need to take care of it.
The only sign, electronic sign I've sold is the one to the City of Jacksonville Beach. Here in this area. But, I mean, I've sold signs in Little Rock, Arkansas, Messing Center, Fort Benning, Georgia. The sub-base up there sold too, the sub-base. The computer inside, the person controlling the copy, also controls the brightness. Now, we're supposed to, when we indoctrinate them on the use of electronic message center, we express the need that it be set at dusk, reduced. In the daytime it can be compensate for the sun, but at night it needs to go down. So,
And self-policing.
I'm sorry.
And self-policing.
Yeah, there's enough concerned citizens, I think, that would, like yourself, that would call the city and say the sign's too bright. And if I saw something wrong, I'd certainly call.
I have a question. Is there a way in the ordinance, either present or future, that could control the intensity that's allowable?
There are two ways to measure brightness. One is called nits, the other is foot candles.
Right.
And I've written an ordinance before that measures it both ways, because the outdoor advertising industry is usually on the other side of where I am, says we should measure it by foot candles, but other folks who say they should measure it by nits because it's light that's emitting outwards, it's not bouncing off. To go to the issue that you're talking about, when you're competing with the sun during the day, 7,500 nits is like what a digital billboard wants to have 7,500 nits. At night, it's 350. The transition time between dusk and dawn is a problem time. But the question is, the only way you can deal with it is either have equipment that makes automatic adjustments or have the operator make those adjustments. So that's problematic. For enforcement purposes, good luck. I see a digital billboard that is at St. Nicholas, right in the middle of the residential area. I see it out my windows at Rogers Towers, well over a mile away. I can see it during the day, and at dusk and dawn, you can see it. It's like a beacon. So those are problems where there's an on-site small sign. I mean, these are the problems that I think the city of Concord, New Hampshire was trying to address. They didn't specifically get into brightness, but you have to regulate brightness, and if you have them, and that's all I can say.
One thing I can say is we don't do billboards, all right? All of ours are on premise. Billboards, Bill.
Just going back to the question of the one that a little bit, Don, said they had a stack of these violations in downtown Jacksonville. They were clearly not able to monitor those signs. We've seen that same thing happen in Jacksonville Beach. Right now, I've had to make a couple calls about various businesses that are not honoring the digital sign codes already that exist here today. We also had a situation where a Starbucks sign slipped in, quote, under the planning department's ability to control it, and now we've been facing a lawsuit by someone else that owns the Burger King. And because of the Starbucks set of precedents, so now they're coming back to us. And what we're seeing now, I have been on the planning commission for over 18 years. I have the ability to call Nathan Slaughter, talk to planning directors, Delray Beach, Palmer, Coral Springs, you name Laguna Beach, La Jolla. And why, if digital signs are so popular, are these cities banning them? They outright ban them. They don't even allow them. And there's not one shred of evidence, that says allowing digital signs or changing the time of the copy increase or makes the city more business friendly. There's not one shred of evidence, except to the sign company. Of course, it's going to become business friendly to the sign company, but let me just ask you this. We just got Trader Joe's. We just got Jimmy John's. We're getting Whole Foods. None of them have a problem with our current existing sign code. What drives the need to change that? If at this point we're not having any problem attracting new, exciting businesses to the beach. The beauty of Jacksonville Beach is the beauty of Jacksonville Beach. It does not involve signs. So why would we make that change? Why would we not go in the other direction, like the very cities that a lot of us want to go to and become, and ban digital signs altogether? This picture is a perfect example. Would you rather go to that street, or would you rather go to the street before this picture? Would you rather go to this street right here, or would you rather be on the street that was before this picture? And if you say that you'd rather go this street, then we should be moving in the other direction and controlling the signs more, because we drafted a very good sign ordinance except for the digital sign part of it. And I'd just like to get your comments on that. Yeah, sure. Either one.
It doesn't, I don't have, there's plenty of people that come to Jacksonville Beach, regardless of whether there's a digital sign or not. But businesses feel the need for them.
But there's no proof. There's no
proof
that says that digital sign. So why do we sacrifice the quality of life for the residents for something that we can't?
Who says we sacrifice it?
Well,
I don't want to live in a service. I want to live in something that looks like Amelia Island or Hilton Head, not Daytona Beach.
I think the answer, and I've been in advising communities for a long time, and helping local governments and planning commissions around the country grapple with these issues. When I saw the Dr. Seuss pamphlet years ago, and then I saw it, I had forgotten about it. Right. Then I saw it again, and I realized the brilliance of that man. He described it perfectly. He identified human nature. When you're competing for business, you want to have something a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit flashier than the guy next door. Exacts my tax with is that competition where it can lead to something that is actually destructive. And this is why having strong rules and regulations that are strictly enforced so that nobody has the upper hand, everybody plays by the same rules, and it's good for the community, for the people that live in the community. And people that come to visit remember that as a beautiful place. I was in Clearwater recently. I hadn't been back for a couple of years. And it was even more beautiful than it was 2 years earlier when I was there advising them on sign regulations. They are doing things every day that takes it into a better and better community. It's okay to be in the sign business and sell signs. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's acceptable to have electronic signs, but if you do decide to make that decision, there are issues that open up dealing with enforcement. And then the question is, like, where do you go? Do you have a 2-hour dwell time? Do you change it once a day? Do you change it, every 6 hours, every 1 hour, every 30 minutes? These are decisions that have to be balanced, but as you start going down this slope of more frequent changes, you start running into enforcement problems, and you start getting into aesthetic problems, and at some point you run into traffic safety issues.
That's my question. Have either of you pulled crash data from the areas where you provided and see if it increases statistically?
I've been in this business 37 years. To my own knowledge, I've never known a sign to cause an accident. Now, if a person's a conscientious driver, and I drive over 25,000 miles a year, and not an accident.
Well, I think not everybody on the road, though, is necessarily a conscientious driver.
I don't know, how do you cure that?
For those of you who are involved in government here at the beaches, the person that you should contact is Jerry Wachtel, who's the chair of the Transportation Research Board. He is the most knowledgeable, probably human factors engineer in the United States. Susie Lee knows him, and he knows Susie Lee. He's in California, and he's very well respected, and he's a good source. You shouldn't rely upon Jerry Wachtel as the only source, but it's Jerry, J-E-R-R-Y, Wachtel, W-A-C-H-T-E-L, with the Viridian Group. And you can get up-to-date data in the traffic safety studies. One thing to be careful about statistics, statistics can sometimes be garbage in, garbage out. So you'll find out if you really get into the literature why statistics are an issue. There's also a lot of work being done in Europe, in England, in Switzerland, in Finland, in Australia, around the world, and Israel, dealing with traffic safety issues, dealing with electronic signs. So there's a wealth of information that's being developed as our eyeballs are being attracted to other things.
Now, I first came to Jacksonville in 1956 as a young seaman stationed in NAS Jack. I've seen a lot of positive moves in Jacksonville in all three of the beaches since 1956. I'm 76 myself, and I retired off the Saratoga, 1975. I remember when 3rd Street and 1st Street were really bad, and the cast mayors have really done a good job of cleaning it up, the road, the medians, and everything else. There's been a lot of beautification done in the City of Jacksonville Beach. So,
Bruce?
Yeah. I think there's a wealth of discussion that can go on with this. These, by the way, probably are the worst thing on the highway right now, so we might as well get to how we get distracted. But when it comes to signs, I guess I just want to present from the standpoint of communication what a business has to do and do it efficiently, like without being cluttering the landscape. These are all old slides, so yeah, big billboards and ugly presentations of, traffic pollution. I get that, but I also think that Jax Beach probably did a pretty decent job of saying, hey, we're going to figure out a way to communicate with the people coming into the beaches in some effective manner where, someone's not out there changing graphics that cost, whatever amount of money to put new letters up or paint something new or build something new or whatever. A digital sign is probably pretty efficient if it's managed the right way. So I just want us to kind of be sensitive to both sides of this, and not say, hey, it's time to load up graphics and distract our community. But I feel as a person that's in communications, it's important that we're making it easy for a business to sustain itself, because it does cost a lot of money to produce a sign. So if you can change out a digital message without polluting the space, I'm all for it.
Curtis, the City of Jacksonville Beach a while back changed it so that height, they got a height restriction, square footage restriction. Now, the two of them I did, George Lindley's car wash, did that sign years ago, Parrish Novels, on 3rd Street. But right now, in Gainesville, doing UF Children's Hospital, we don't purposely go out and sell electronic medicine for $20,000 plus. They're never going to get cheaper. The price keeps increasing. I've been doing this 37 years, finding out. I've been selling message centers for 37 years.
Well, that's simply not true about the signs getting cheaper.
Oh, it is true.
There's nothing in technology today that
The price of the LEDs keep
I
going
had a
up.
quote from the paper from the sign that they did, the Jaguar sign. They talked about it turning from dollars to pennies for those LED bulbs. And technology alone, there's nothing that you can point out technology-wise that does not drop in price if you just look at calculators and things like that. So these LED signs, And Jim brings up a good point. The Watson, if you look at the Watson, the new Watson sign, how big it is and how bright it is. Back to the Dr. Seuss, what you're going to see is everybody else trying to get bigger and brighter. As these signs and the ability to make them come down in price, which they will, they absolutely will. That's absolutely not true that they're not. You will find them being able to be applied on monument signs, et cetera, et cetera. Then what you'll see is you'll see, like the Watson sign in South Jacks Beach, you'll see them trying to compete and change, depending on the times it can change. If you can imagine that Watson sign and what signs up and down 3rd Street, digital signs changing at different intervals, then you have what would be called, to me, an absolute nightmare. And it does not indicate what this beach should be. We do not want to turn around 10 years from now and undo what we're doing now. We want to be able to look back on what we did as a city council and mayor and say that they did the right thing, not how do we undo this thing. So that's why
For 7 years, I've never known the cost of electronic signs to go down. They keep going up for one reason or another.
Lee's got a question here.
Yeah, and it's really directed at Jim and communication here. And the word is communicate, communicate, communicate. The night Jim spoke about the real estate sign or avenue work. Of course, nobody asked my permission to put that sign up, and it was put up. But the digital, I went and told the general manager of the office the next day, I said, there was a complaint at City Hall that the digital is too bright, and don't even need street lights, they're so bright. The general manager said, all anybody has to do is communicate to me, they're too bright, we'll tone them down, and this isn't for or against that, this is just saying, sometimes we need to just communicate. Don't criticize people for what they're doing before you even go to them and say, would you tone your sign down?
If somebody has the right to do something, and as a realty company, and you build something, although maybe you didn't follow the setback requirements, and somehow you got a permit for that. Let's say you follow the setback requirements, and you have somebody who changes every 8 seconds. And that decision is being made higher up the corporate. And you have individuals, one after another, not only call management, come to the office, sit down, and complain about, and this is my neighborhood, Fairfax Manor. I grew up there starting in 1959, went to Fishwell Elementary. I mean, everybody from multiple neighborhoods have been complaining about it, but they can't get anything done because it's there, and nobody, it could be done, could like just go back to having a static sign. The neighborhood is completely against it. All the neighbors, into the other adjoining neighborhoods are all against it, but they can't do anything because the decision was made in legislation prepared by
Not me.
Our buddy's Clear Channel.
No,
I don't do paperwork.
Listen up.
I know you don't do it, but Clear Channel wrote legislation that affected all on-site signs in the city of Jacksonville. And that's why we have that problem in Fairfax Manor today. And so it begins really at meetings like this as to what you want for your community. And there are choices. And it's not to say that one choice is the right choice. I mean, it's not my choice. I don't live in Jacksonville Beach. It's a choice for Jacksonville Beach. But I know if Fairfax Manor was a city, if Ortega and Riverside and Avondale were a city, I guarantee you that ordinance would never have passed because people would live for it.
I just so happened to live in Clearwater, right near there in 1988. And one thing you haven't spoken to is the quality of businesses that were along that road as that proliferation of garbage went on. Clearwater spent billions of dollars trying to clean up that road because it was such an eyesore to the gateway to their community.
I have to
say, you know, I live here in Jacksonville Beach and I really love this town. The first thing I come over the bridge on Beach Boulevard, and the first frickin' thing I see is that beach marine sign. Scares the hell out. Scares the hell out. Clearwater is still working on their thing. I own a bunch of rental properties down there, so I have to go there once a month. So I've seen the change. The beaches have spent millions of dollars on trying to create a family-friendly environment. They've spent money on landscaping, islands, parking spots, redoing the islands, pavers, everything you can think of. We've spent money on consultants, which we haven't heard from yet. And I'm hoping that we don't enact some legislation or some ordinance that governs these signs until we utilize some of the money we've spent on consultants to steer us down that path. I travel, and you're right. When I go to those little towns and stuff, and those picturesque seaside communities, and there's not a bunch of signage, and it's kind of quaint, those businesses are making some money. And they're not competing for the signage, and if indeed you're right, and the signs are super expensive, if all the businesses are playing on a level playing field, and they don't have to spend their money on the signage, then maybe my food isn't going to cost as much either. Because it's a level, it's a level playing field. So there is a middle ground for everything. In America, it's pretty much about compromise. And the best thing I can think of is trying to make most people happy, and there's going to be one side that's not going to be happy, and another side that's not going to be happy, but most people, happy with something that we draft. But to our city council, and as this goes on, I will lobby for, if you want to say that we listen to some of our consultants that we're paying a bunch of money to try and, because once we enact something, it's hard to undo. It's really hard to undo. So, that's...
Andy?
And just to use your Dr. Seuss analogy, it's a Starbelly Speeches kind of a thing. They have stars on ours, so we want stars. And we have made our signs smaller. You can't put up the message like you used to do. The McDonald's sign that's too bright, that is so too bright, Big Mac $5. Well, that used to be up on the sign that they're not allowed to have anymore. Watson used to have all kinds of stuff. They had a much bigger sign. They're not allowed to have that space anymore. So now it's about regulating how it's used. It can be done. And it can actually be cleaner and nicer if it's done right. So I don't think that signs are bad. I would rather not have the sign spinner guys if you want to talk about a distraction. So if we have to kind of pick our poison, there's going to be signs. There are businesses, there's going to be signs. How can we do it? John?
You know why we're here? This is the funny part. I walked into George's office and I said, that sign out there that we've got on Beach Boulevard, let's put the Fletcher High School football game on it. And he said, well, if we do that, we're going to go ahead and it's got to be up for 24 hours and we'll lose our ability to do everything else. I said, well, do we want to look at this as a city? Do we want to look at how we regulate these types of signs? And he said, well, if we do it for ours, we have to do it for everybody. So I said, I understand that. But is there a fair compromise? So not one consultant has approached me or any other member of the city council that I'm aware of. A decision was made to draft an ordinance to take a look at changing it to allow us to have some flexibility. The 8 seconds was strictly, George was matching the Jacksonville instruction. Nobody directed him to do that. No consultant suggested that. That was just what he said, will keep us even with Jacksonville. Nobody made a big deal about it. We can't get it out of Planning Commission because they've recommended that they can't find data that supports or defends the change of sign or what the appropriate time would be. So my response has been to the city staff, we'll go back and ask them what's appropriate. I saw one of your slides up there had in Clearwater menu changes 3 hours, and I'm completely. Nobody's trying to push this down anybody's throats. And excuse me, Mr. Willis, I will listen patiently while you gave your. I'd ask the same respect.
But the references I made to City Hall was they put up things instantly. was Amber Alert, Silver Alert.
Exactly, or high school football games, or title conditions, or warnings out there. And you know, the problem, and one of the newspaper called me and said, well, how would you feel about doing that for just non-profits? We can't do that. We can't designate only one group can do this.
Right.
So, you know, I just want to re-emphasize here that nobody's standing here and beating their chest and saying, we want 8 seconds. Maybe it is 60 seconds, maybe it's 4 hours. I don't know what that number is, but there's got to be a compromise here somewhere. And again, with all due respect, when you showed the signs of 1988 as to Clearwater, I've seen those too. You know, we look kind of like that in the old days here. And we don't anymore. And we're not going to look like that again because there is a good sign ordinance in place.
What Clearwater did is, again, because I was involved, that was like a 3-year process. It went for a really long time because we were trying to get it right and trying to get everybody to buy in, not just the chamber, but the separate business group and the neighborhoods. They're trying to get everybody to have complete buy-in. I think by and large there was a complete buy-in. And they were trying to accommodate everybody. And it was, that code is very much written as a functional code. I defended it at the 11th Circuit and successfully the district court did at the 11th Circuit. An earlier iteration of that code is called the functional approach. You're defining signs and classifying signs, categorizing signs by the function they serve. So a menu sign, for example, serves a different purpose than other types of signs. So they were trying to accommodate menu signs. For a general advertising on-premise sign, they're trying to accommodate that, but different than a menu sign because menus change more frequently. So they were trying to accommodate it, but they were trying to do it in a way that was consistent with community character. That isn't to say that there isn't rationale to have a complete prohibition. But that's what I'm most familiar with is Clearwater. It's a functional approach. That's why I call it the middle ground. If it were me, and depending on the community, I might choose a prohibition. But Clearwater was doing something a little bit different. And I would say, if you know, your staff, I mean, do communicate with the cities and the counties and small communities that don't allow electronic signs, but also communicate with the ones that do, but follow a different approach. I would obviously know how I feel about things that change frequently. But sometimes there's no one right answer.
I agree.
Depends upon the community.
And I think that's in my opinion, the end of this discussion should be, shouldn't we all agree, instead of saying black and white, shouldn't we all agree that maybe we should take a step back and see what does fit here? And maybe it is a little bit different. Maybe it's not.
You know, they don't allow them, but they have one. And you only use PSAs. I mean, I like to see 3 having come out with a book and saying, my favorite one is only rats win rat races. You laughing, Tom? But you know, to put up cute sayings, you like that? But not strictly business, added other things. You know, buy Girl Scout cookies, give United Way.
For me to be wrapped in it, I mean, this is so disingenuous. To try to change a code, a sign code, across the board and try and wrap it around the Fletcher's next football team game is just completely disingenuous.
That's one.
That's why you can't do that, because to say you want to change signs, to throw out there and to change signs in 8 seconds because you want some charity to have the ability to advertise, again, and this to affect every business up and down Jacksonville Beach is just appalling. And for someone to even say that strikes me as someone that doesn't have a vision for down the road in Jacksonville Beach. You would not make that change.
You're the one that keeps referring to the 8 seconds.
I was here when we wrote the original sign code in 2010. We hired a consultant. And if we had listened to our consultant, quote, sign companies and many business owners will try to argue that more and bigger signs are good for business. However, Scenic America references a recent study on signage in the economy when it explains a 5-year study of 35 cities by Mississippi Research and Development Center concluded the way a community looks affects how both residents and visitors feel about it. An attractive community has a better chance at industry, including tourism. In addition, the President's Commission on American Outdoors reported that natural beauty was the most important criteria for adults choosing a site for outdoor recreation. The more a community does to enhance its unique, natural, scenic, and historical and architectural assets, the more tourists it attracts. So that was something we paid for in 2010. Fraser Hubbard Brant Task, and I can't pronounce the last name, but that was a memorandum to George Forbes and Steve Linwood. So why are we going against the very code that we wrote in 2010?
Why do you suggest we're going against that?
Because why do we need to change? It's working now. When you say we're attracting business, we're attracting quality business.
According to
Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Jimmy John's. So why do we need this change? We do not. And to wrap it around changing for, like I said, for a charity or for Fletcher or whatever, again, is just another way to try and affect the change. Especially when you look at changing just a broad brush to all the businesses. My thing is, don't change. If you're going to do anything, we wrote a good sign code. Don't go and change that sign code. Leave it the way it is. You don't have to change it. You don't have to go to 8 seconds. You don't have to go to 30 seconds. You don't have to go to 6 hours. Leave it the way it is.
That's what I heard. That's what he just said. You don't have to change anything.
Right.
So, but we have to discuss it, because it's changing without
We have to
any...
what? I'm sorry.
We need to discuss it, because it is changing.
We've been discussing on the planning commission for 4 different meetings already, and nothing has come up to affect that change or to justify that change. That's why we haven't been able to get past it, because there is no evidence that makes a difference. One bit. Not one piece of evidence except for the sign company.
Either way, for or against the change in frequency.
No, there's evidence. There is evidence for by the sign companies. There's evidence against it by various independent companies, which we have as evidence.
You know, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. What I'm suggesting is that we keep an open mind and look for the right fix for Jacksonville Beach. And
I have a question. So this thing that you have, the report or...
Yeah, this was
from 2010.
2010.
So is that something that the city council has?
That we paid for.
I mean, do we...
I hope they have it.
You have a copy of that? Okay.
And we keep it in mind. We've been beating this thing up on the planning commission. We've had it open mind all the way along. This is not our first walk down this road by any stretch of the imagination, but again, we just don't have a reason. And we've been debating it on the planning commission at least, I think it's 3 or 4 meetings. So it's not like we haven't been debating.
So we do need to wrap up because it is a little after 8. But do we have any other questions for these gentlemen who are here with us tonight? Because obviously it's it's an issue that has a lot of aspects to it. Do you have a question?
I have a question. We have billboard ordinance being proposed in Jacksonville. We have changes being proposed in Jacksonville Beach. How many citizens are asking for these changes? How many businesses are saying, oh, I've got to have this sign? Who's originating the proposals?
I don't know.
Are the buyers of the signs asking for this?
In Jacksonville, it is the outdoor advertising industry. It's the 2 largest billboard companies. 2 of the largest billboard companies in the world.
Are citizens showing up at city council saying, I want to change the sign ordinance, we want more signs?
There were 72 speaker cards filled out against the proposal. Only 2 speakers at the city council meeting last week spoke in favor of it. It was 2 lawyers who drafted it. It went to all 6 citizens planning advisory councils. All 6 voted against it. The combined vote was 99 to 1 against. Keep Jacksonville Beautiful Commission unanimously voted against it. And yet, if the vote were today, I would predict it would pass, maybe veto approved by the 19-member city council. I mean, and this is 6 lobbyists that have been working this bill, and most of them for the past 14 months.
So what do we do at this point?
You show up. I don't want to get sick to, I would say, show up at, drive to the ditch on the other side of the ditch, and show up, call, send emails. I mean, Sandy will know how to get in touch. There's a Scenic Advocate website. Because it's not an ordinance they're seeking to just change, this is the countywide charter. It's kind of like a belt and suspenders approach. And we maybe are on the same side of this issue on buildings. There's a charter that I was involved with that affects the beaches too, it protects the beaches. When you repeal that protection, you open the door, and those who lived in Neptune Beach will remember the Solanke case, which was a challenge to the ordinance code, the on-site signs.
Harry, wait a minute. That was before Harry's time, but.
No, it has nothing to do with
It was a challenge to the on-site sign code of Neptune Beach. It wasn't a challenge on billboards, because there are 2 protections. There's the protection of your ordinance codes on prohibited billboards in different ways at the beaches, but then you have a charter, a countywide charter that protects you too. When you I'm the most feared litigator of the outdoor advertising industry in America. I know my stuff. When you remove that protection, it's like having a hunting season that's open 365 days a year. You will be targeted because you remove something that they can't go after because they waived all right to challenge it in the settlement agreements that were signed in the 1990s. When you remove that protection in the charter, it affects the beaches, communities, and nobody is sounding the alarm. And that alarm should be sounded right now, and I know Warren knows exactly what I mean. Because remember being at that settlement negotiations in 2001? Sure. That very company that is rewriting the charter, that they agreed to. They're actually, Warren, they're now saying that agreement that you helped participate in that mediation is void and unenforceable.
Bill, doesn't a charter amendment require a vote of the people?
It should, but the general counsel's office is saying that 10 city council members can amend the charter, even the one that was voted in by the people.
Now, Harry, when we brought up about that electronic message center and that TV, that sign was put up illegally, if I can remember correctly. You remember that, Harry? But they said
I remember the last.
Yeah, that's what
That's the one he's talking about.
Okay, what about it?
Yeah.
They lost the case on the 11th Circuit, and the no-vote review that they couldn't have it didn't come back to the U.S. District Court. So it was the worst decision in the sign case in the U.S. history. It was, I can tell you all about what happened.
We won the first round and lost the second.
And he lost it with no right to program.
Yeah.
That's why we proceed very cautiously today.
We didn't do it. We didn't do it.
There's a case in the U.S. Supreme Court has accepted a case out of appeal of the town of Gilbert, Arizona, where the challengers are citing the Neptune Beach case to change the law in America to strike down sign regulations and all of the governments.
Okay, so I think.
Good, Bill. See you again.
Thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it. All right, and just want to remind everybody, September 27th is the 10-year anniversary